This is Leadership in Action, and I'm Mark Stiles, your host. Join me as we delve deep into the passions, expertise, and experiences of Boston area innovators. Sponsored by the Boston chapter of Entrepreneurs Organization, this is Leadership in Action. Hey folks, welcome back to Leadership in Action, your Boston chapter of EO's podcast. Today's guest, a financial mastermind. He has 25 years experience as an investment fiduciary. He has been featured in the Wall Street Journal, Investors Business Daily, and Bloomberg, just to name a few. Partner, Chief Investment Officer at Antaeus Wealth Advisors, LLC. Please meet Evan Welch.
Hi, everybody.
How you been?
I'm great. Well, I'm excited for 2023.
Awesome. You ready for the question?
I'm ready.
What is a common misconception about leadership, running a business, and or being an entrepreneur? Go.
So I think a common misconception about leadership and business owners and entrepreneurs is that they are selfish, particularly among those who are not business owners or entrepreneurs. I think that, a good leader puts their team first, puts their employees first. And those are the firms that really thrive because, frankly, a good leader and a good business owner and an entrepreneur cannot do a good job if they don't have a good team behind them, because you can't build a business all by yourself. It's pretty hard. And, I think a good leader is curious and they help their employees understand the why behind the business. I know we've all heard about that with Apple and some other companies, not just, here's what we do, but, why do we do this? Like, what's the North Star? And I think, frankly, the media is easy to beat up, but when you look at the larger companies out there, maybe, Entrepreneur 2.0, a lot of CEOs, right, are seen in the media as selfish, stock options, their stock, their compensation, as opposed to the company. And, obviously 100,000 employee company is a little bit different than most entrepreneurial businesses. But I think that is a common misconception. A lot of rank and file feel or believe. And I think it's often incorrect.
Often incorrect, but it is correct in a lot of situations still here in the 2023.
Yes, but I think there are selfish people of all jobs, right? And there are certainly, most entrepreneurs are pretty motivated people, or else they wouldn't take the risk. They're going to be pretty self-motivated typically, and maybe a little bit self-focused. But the entrepreneurs that I've met through many, many years who are successful are amazing people. And yes, they're leaders and go get it. And, they're self-starters, if you will, but they're not selfish.
It's a really interesting conversation because it gets so deep, right? So, we can go down the path of culture and the evolution of business and where people were in the 1980s and 90s, what was the motivation? What was the perception? What were you striving for as a business owner, right? Like there was a certain perception that you had to carry with the suit, the really expensive suit and shoes and expensive watch. And, that perception was part of the job. It's interesting when you see that gap kind of closing in a little bit too, right? Between ownership and contributors. Somebody on this podcast actually referred to as contributors, and I loved it, because I always hate that, when someone's like, oh, he's my boss or I work for. It's like, no. We're in this together. We work with, right? We work together for a common purpose and goal. But it wasn't that long ago that was something that was almost being taught, right?
Absolutely. And I think, part of that is probably the pandemic, that's part of it. And as you mentioned, things seem to be slightly less formal, I guess. I think with what's happened also in the last couple of years with the pandemic, I think a lot of business owners have realized how key their employees are, not just having them on, as a part of the team and participating and engaged, but actually having them around, right? When obviously a lot of businesses are run predominantly virtual and online, but I also think it's helped people understand how important those interactions are with their team and how much their team really brings to the table. And of course, then we have the more, I guess, global national changes that we've seen with, labor getting more involved and more active, and all of that as well. And, one of the things I heard that was great when we were, I was talking, this is totally from a financial background. I think I was talking to someone at one of the big investment houses or banks, and they said, well, COVID was a turning point where the minimum wage worker who was doing 70 hours a week at Applebee's or some, job like that said, I'm not doing this anymore. It's just not worth it. So
it's not worth it. And I'm not being appreciated enough. I went into a coffee shop right around the holidays, and everybody's in that spirit of giving, and this coffee shop, for some reason, you had to actually tell them you were going to tip them before you ordered. So the system wasn't updated. I'm like, can you please get your ownership to update this so that we can appreciate what you're doing? I walked in there on December 23rd, and there was a sign on there that said, we are open December 24th, 6 a.m. to 2, December 25th, 6 a.m. to 2, December 31st, 6 a.m. to 2, January 1st, 6 a.m. And they were proud of that. But then I see how they're treating their people, and it's like, this is not a long-term sustainable business model at all.
Yeah. I mean, we certainly, we were not working on Christmas.
No.
Christmas Day. And yeah, I mean, I at this point, I mean, I'm so used to just tipping. It seems like, as you mentioned, it seems bizarre when there's not an opt out to tip as opposed to an opt in.
But it's amazing to see a business these days. And you mentioned COVID, you're right. Coming out of COVID, how important humans simply showing up, for a job, how they could continue to treat them that way. And it's refreshing to know that, those are actually the outliers now, the anomalies. You see that and you're like, whoa, I actually took a picture of the sign. I didn't know why I was taking a picture of it, but I took a picture of it because it hit me so hard that it's like, you're making people come in, but yet everybody who wants a cup of coffee on those days could actually make it at home. They could sit back and say, I don't need to go to that coffee shop and make certain that somebody is away from their family making me a cup of coffee, but the owner, it's very short-sighted. And it's like, I'm going to be the one that's open. Well, there's other factors involved here. There's collateral damage when you market that, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, so I think we go to coffee houses for the experience. That's a big part of it. And if the employees there are not happy, you're going to feel that. And I don't know about you, but I've been to many coffee houses, and it could be some of the national chains, or it could be a local place. And you can tell when the employees are enjoying their job.
Right.
And it just feels more comfortable. Like when I do business travel and I go to a coffee shop and I find a place that's got that kind of energy, I don't know. It even makes me more productive when I'm sitting in there working. So
isn't
I know
it
exactly
amazing?
what you're talking about.
It's contagious. It's a contagion, right? So it's like, but I don't want to go back there if I don't feel good about it, right? So it's very short-sighted. Tell me what Antaeus means. Antaeus Wealth Advisors.
So Antaeus is the name of a mythological Greek giant. And what happened was a bunch of us formed this firm at the end of 2010. And we were all coming from large publicly traded organizations where most of us cut our teeth, and we wanted to start our own business, right? And doing it the right way and build it from the ground up, as opposed to trying to fit into some large company's model. And ultimately, the way we came with Antaeus is a large part of what we do is financial planning. And what I mean by that is we help people kind of stay focused and grounded and nudge them in the right direction, because there's so much out there, whether it's, the markets or taxes or stuff happening in the news, things happening in their lives, people getting sick or divorce or whatever may be happening. And so the way the myth about Antaeus was, the way he kept his strength was by staying grounded. So if he actually was removed from the earth, he got weak quickly. And so the analogy for us is that if we can keep our clients grounded, and focused on what they can control, then the rest of it will work out, regardless of what happens in the markets and so forth. And they will get to where they're trying to go, and they will not run out of money, hopefully, and they will, reach financial independence, which I think is the goal for most people. And the irony of it, though, is if you read about Antaeus, he actually wasn't a very good or nice person or nice God if you read about it. But we still think the analogy really is sound, and it's a lot of what we do.
What's the difference between an RIA and a CFP or some other financial advisor?
So an RIA, a registered investment advisor, is registered with either the Securities and Exchange Commission on a national level or with the state. And registered investment advisors, they are fee only, so they cannot charge commissions and so forth. They have a fiduciary standard, which a lot of people hear, which in plain English, for you as an attorney and for doctors and other people in those advisory roles, is you have to put the needs and interests of your client or your patient first at all times. And of course, confidentiality and all that, but that's regardless. So that's what a registered investment advisor is. A certified financial planner, a CFP, that's what we call a designation. So that's not actually a license to practice investing or planning, but it's someone who goes to typically an 18-month program and learns a lot about the basics of financial planning. So think tax, estate planning, insurance, investment management, cash flow, retirement planning, all that kind of stuff, and how to build, from a client comes to you, and how to take all their information, synthesize it, into an analysis based on their goals, and provide them with objective, unbiased advice on what steps to take to achieve their goals. And so that's what, the CFP is definitely one of the probably most respected designations in our quote unquote industry, because it's so focused on putting the client in the middle, in the center of the engagement. And it's based on these principles. And also CFPs, like a lot of, like being an attorney, you need to have a clean record, because if you don't, they're going to pull it from you.
Right.
So there's a lot of reasons. It doesn't mean that there aren't good advisors who aren't CFPs. I mean, that's not true at all. But if someone has a CFP, it's usually a good sign.
So it's almost like a degree, where an RIA is a license.
Yeah, and an RIA is actually a company that's registered. And so what RIAs have, if you want to get real technical, are IARs, which are investment advisor representatives. So those are the individuals you interact with who work at an RIA. They're the ones giving you the advice under that umbrella. And this goes into securities laws in the 1930s, and it gets a little. We could dive very deep, and I'm sure.
Well, of course,
we don't want to go there.
I'm curious. So, of course, I assume the listener is curious. But what I'm always curious about is when you talk to an RIA, and we're bound to act in the best interest of our client. And you sit back and you're like, isn't everybody? Aren't all advisors? But no. I mean, there's, I believe it's difficult to regulate ethics. I mean, I think just like your friends and people you do business with, you do business, some people are going to do the right thing, and others will not if it's in their best interest, and if they can get away with it. That all being said, an RIA, there is actually legal liability. And so you see a lot less of that. That being said, I mean, remember Bernie Madoff, and that was an RIA. He wasn't being regulated very well. So one could say it was the regulators, but he was an RIA. It makes a lot of sense, right? I mean, it makes total sense. And it's funny you bring up Bernie Madoff. I recently watched that limited miniseries that came out on Netflix. Anyone listening, highly encourage it. Really well done, really well explained, really a really interesting look at human nature, right? They saw him as a godlike figure. Like, they're not going to look at that guy Margolis from Boston, I think, who kept whistleblowing, kept sending in, this is not right. This isn't right. It can't be right. And they're like, not Bernie. Bernie started the NASDAQ, so it's really interesting that monster, but they did a really good job with it. So I definitely would encourage checking it out. But I can't imagine, again, you think it could never happen again, but I can't imagine that it could happen the way it happened with
I think it would be much harder today, but look, there's been Ponzi schemes since
yeah,
the guy Ponzi, probably
yeah,
before him, right? And it's not just in finance; it's in all
right,
sorts of industries. And there are bad actors, and that's why we need regulation. And unfortunately, the lion's share of those of us who are ethical and do what's right, we have to deal with a lot of regulation,
right.
which I think is necessary to protect all of us, and also to protect the financial system in itself. But just like being a doctor and attorney, I just keep going back to those two because they're highly regulated. Um, it can be a little frustrating sometimes, dealing with all the regulation, because sometimes you're saying, well, we're already doing all this, and why wouldn't we? But it is what it is.
Right. Do no harm, act zealously, best interest of your client, right? Like that
Mm-hmm.
should be a stamp of every adult, right? As you pass into adulthood, as childhood, right? This is the stamp
Mm-hmm.
that you receive. But you're right, there's bad actors, they're everywhere. What motivates them? I always say those people who are doing the hacking into the computers and the malware and the ransomware, it's like, they're so smart. It would be great if they actually did something for humanity, instead of for their own self-interests.
Yes, they are. They are definitely. It's frustrating, and look at all the security and all the dual authentication we have to deal with, and changing passwords and all that. And that's all because if there weren't any bad actors, bad hackers, we wouldn't have to do any of that.
I know. I just heard this morning LifeLock got hacked. Right. I mean, LifeLock. They're going to actually go after the big ones just to send a message, right? So let me ask you about EO. How long have you been a member at EO?
I've been we were trying to figure this out the other day. I think I'd have to look it up to be exact, but it's close to a decade now.
Wow.
It might be 8 years or 9 years, but it's getting up there. It's time is flying.
Oh yeah,
Years
it
are
is
fast.
So how has it helped you?
Oh, it's been amazing. I mean, I'm a big cheerleader for EO. I mean, I think it's one of the best decisions I ever made. Actually, one of my business partners, he was a member before I was, and kind of recommended it to me. And back then, the reason why was, I'm so technical. I historically been so technical in my job. I love to manage money, build portfolios. I love financial planning, but I wasn't very good at running a business. And I was one of those kind of entrepreneurs who had trouble delegating and so forth. And it really helped me start to look at how to be a better, business owner and leader, as we started the podcast talking about. And but what has actually happened is, one of my favorite experiences is I went to Global University that was in New York, and I'll never forget, there were, I think, about 1,100 entrepreneurs there, and over 800 of them were not Americans. And just getting exposed to these business leaders from all over the world and countries that these days, with all the stuff going on in the world and COVID and wars, probably can't even interact with these people right now, and their perspectives. And it just made me realize how many blind spots I have just from growing up in America. Not that there's anything wrong with that. I mean, I'm very grateful to be in America, but it made me recognize how much that has impacted me. So some of these global universities have been great. The speakers are amazing. I've been to EO Nerve, which I think is fantastic. I'm probably going to go this year as well. That's been very helpful. I've gone to chapter events over the years. The last few years, it's been more difficult because, as we talked about earlier, I've got 3 daughters who are very active in sports. And now that they're older, it's not in the town, it's all over the place. So it's been a little harder for me to engage in some of those, but I do plan to go to more as they get older. And lastly, of course, the forum itself and the skills that I've developed and the trust and the friendship. And I'm just a happier person because, once a month I'm basically, and we interact a lot more than that, but once a month we're formally putting our personal 5% out there and our professional 5%. And, I'm managing through life, and it's therapeutic to me. I honestly think it's one of the best things I ever did. And I did, by the way, have to cut out a couple of things to make EO because, of course, for a forum to work well, it's got to be other than your family, like one of the biggest priorities, like you don't miss forum. And, we have an amazing forum. So yeah, I'm a big cheerleader, and I know part of that is just, I have a great forum, but that's because we've worked hard at it and people are committed.
I agree with you. And it's it's that, as a business owner, even if you have partners, you're kind of on an island, so
Yeah.
you look around and you're like, who do I talk to about this? Right. Who doesn't have a financial stake in this question that I have, right? Who doesn't have an emotional reaction to this question that I have? And I found that in EO, both in the forum and as I get to know a lot of the local Boston members. And like you said, Nerve was great. So you're going to Tampa?
Yeah, that's the plan. I'm actually pushing to get our whole forum to go, because we
Cool.
do a retreat and then a mini retreat, and we're hoping to I'm hoping to get that one of those combined into that, because I think we went to Charleston before COVID. I think it was 19, and I thought it was phenomenal. I was very
Yeah.
impressed, and some of the speakers, and also of course just the interaction, and even with EO Boston. I mean, because like I mentioned, like I haven't gone to a ton of events here. And I ended up spending so much time with members in our chapter down there, and it was great. And of course, everyone's more relaxed because they're not at home, and they're unplugged. So, yeah, I'm really hoping to go this year, and I think it's quite likely I will.
So help me understand how you found your way into owning your own business. Like, give us the journey there. So out of school, I'm going to be a financial advisor. Here we go. Game on.
Well, so I mean, I guess scroll back a little bit.
Yeah. Let's go back as far as you want.
Yeah, so investing, I started investing as a teenager.
Cool.
I just was fascinated by it, and I started, I opened a brokerage account at one of the wirehouses when I was 12, and bought some shares of Coca-Cola and GE. Actually, I remember specifically, and back then it was pretty expensive to buy stocks, and that got me first kind of piqued my interest in this space. And then I had some really amazing internships in college, one in Europe and one in Boston, which helped refine that. But I actually, when I graduated from college, I was going to open a car wash down in Atlanta, Georgia, with two of my buddies from growing up, and we were trying to basically, elevate from what you think of a car wash to a very high end experience. And we even worked at car washes around Atlanta and pretended that we had no other options. And I think, some of the owners were a little like, why are these guys working here, kind of thing. And with all due respect, people who work at car washes. But we were literally doing, like, I was out there like drying the cars and that kind of thing.
Doing your due diligence, right? Doing the due diligence,
learning the business and learning, the employees and how they work. And ultimately, I just wanted to go into investment management and financial planning so bad. And I was very close to going to Wall Street, but then I had an interview in Atlanta that I loved with this firm that was more of a financial planning boutique. And that's kind of where I started. And one of the three of us, one of my good friends, he did end up starting this car wash. It was extremely successful. They opened a few of them, and he eventually sold out of it. And he now lives down in Florida. But it actually was a resounding success. And they opened it next to a Ferrari dealership in Atlanta, outside of Atlanta, Georgia, was the first one, and did very well. But I, of course, took a different route, and so here we are.
Well, it's interesting because, you had the idea, you dug in, you knew it would work, but you chased the passion. And that I love. Like you were like, okay, I could make money at this. I bet I can. In fact, I know I can. I've already done the pro forma. I've done the spreadsheet. I have process. We understand, the assets and all of that. But ever since I was 12, I just love me that stock market. So you can't do that now. Mike, I have a 15-year-old who's working to, get a Robinhood account open. I'm like, I don't think so. I think they wait till you're 18 now, right? Like there's some big barriers to entry now, I hope.
Well, the gamification, as we say, of investing is a slippery slope.
Yeah. So, well, let me ask you this. We started to talk earlier about your kids. Tell me about some of the private life. So you've got EO, you've got your business, you've got your successes. Tell me about the rest of the balance.
Well, I'm a pretty active person, like a lot of entrepreneurs, I guess, if there's a stereotype. I I play hockey, play ice hockey. I coach ice hockey. I coach a few teams, and I cycle, ride my bike. I swim. I love to snow ski. That's a big passion of mine, as is traveling. Actually, I'm going to Austria in a week to go skiing.
Nice.
So that's a big focus. And, COVID was hard for me. I also love to be in the air. I'm actually, almost got my pilot license when I was 28, and I'm 48 now. And the deal my wife and I made was when I'm 50, get my pilot license, because she's convinced that something's going to go bad. And, the kids are getting older. Nothing's going to go bad, but that was the deal we made. And, yeah, so I, what else? I grew up originally from Belmont, Massachusetts, but I actually grew up in Connecticut because we moved there when I was 5. My father transferred from Mass General to a hospital down in Connecticut. And then I went to a prep school in Connecticut, and then ended up at Colgate in upstate New York. And I love the snow, but, it was pretty gray up there. And I said, this weather's awful. And I was thinking about moving to New York or Boston. And then my buddy kind of said, hey, Atlanta's up and coming. And I actually had gone to the Olympics in 96. So I graduated college in 97. And I said, all right, well, why not? Like, let's go down there. And that's how we ended up down there. Then fast forward, 9/11 happened and some other things. And I kind of woke up and said, what am I doing in Georgia? And I moved back to Boston in 2002, and, met my wife at a bar a few months later, and the rest is history. So
I love it.
Yeah,
tell me about
coaching.
I
can tell you a lot more, but.
Well, tell me about coaching, because that was one of my big needs is, my business, part of, owning your own business, people, we have the myth busting that we talk about, what perceptions are and all, but the reality of it is you control a lot, right? So I decided I was going to move my office to the town that we are raising our kids in, so that I could be at any field at any time, whether that was good for my kids or they'll be seeking a lot of therapy in the future for my coaching extravaganzas. Time will tell, but that was super important to me. But it was really interesting to me to watch, the youth of that time, right? So we're going back 10 years up until I think the last whistle I blew was probably 3 years ago, but also like the dynamics between the parents who all think everyone's going to be a Division I athlete or a professional or Olympian or what have you. How is it these days? Is that tempering? Is that starting to pendulum starting to swing back to normalcy yet, or no?
I mean, I think a lot of it depends on, what kind of league you're in and what the age of the child and so forth. I mean, part of it, of course, just depends on the personality of the parent.
Right.
So I'm coaching ice hockey. I coached soccer when I coached all 3 of my girls in soccer when they were very young, like think 3rd grade and below.
Yeah.
Which I really enjoyed. I'm not a huge soccer player. I played growing up, but in high school I played a different fall sport. And in college as well. I actually played water polo at a pretty competitive level.
Cool.
But I wanted to, spend more time with my girls, because I just, and once you coach one of them, you feel like you need to coach them all. And it ended up being very rewarding, because not only do you, of course, interact, get to know people in whatever town you're in. But I loved seeing the girls, and by the girls, I mean all of them, not my daughters, go from maybe being timid and nervous or distracted or whatever to being, pretty good athletes. And then seeing them go on to travel and club sports and things like that. Some of them now are, playing at a varsity level in high school. And so it's, that was really rewarding. But, ice hockey, I just have a love for the sport. So, just it's not work for me being on the ice. I love it. And, again, same thing. Love seeing the kids get better and better. And as they get bigger, it's, they start to challenge you, and which is meaning on the ice, which is fun. And as far as the parents, again, like the soccer was pretty easy peasy, because I wasn't, once they went to travel and club, I just handed that off. I didn't want to be part of that. And, it's just watching the games like any other parent. And then although I must say I've enjoyed interacting with a lot of the parents, made a lot of friends. And with hockey, I love the the parents in our hockey community, I mean, they're generally pretty down to earth. I mean, you definitely get, a couple parents who, maybe think that their kid's entire college is going to be based on their athletic prowess. And, I mean, it's not for me to say, but, the percentages, there's a lot of competition. And certainly in hockey, I love the sport, but you do get some rough folks, at some of the games. And we've had some games in some towns where it's gotten a little ugly in terms of the fans or the parents. I mean, I think you get that with all sports, but hockey's pretty notorious for it. And
why do you think that is? Why do you think it comes from hockey? Is it so deep rooted in the culture of professional hockey where they used to drop the gloves and fight? Like, is it that barbaric and that basic?
I think that's part of it. I think the culture of hockey, but I think anyone who plays hockey knows this. I mean, it's a game of speed and intensity, and and of course there is, it's very physical. And so, when you're on the ice, most people or a lot of parents whose kids play hockey, they played hockey just like any sport. I mean, if you loved tennis, it's pretty likely that your child's going to be exposed to that at a young age, or you love golf or whatever. And I think a lot of these parents like me, especially if they played at higher levels, it's a rough sport, and there's a lot of talking under the breath. And, as you probably know, when you get out of breath and you're pumping on all cylinders and you're tired and you've got, all those chemicals in your body. I mean, you can get angry pretty quickly. It's almost, it's kind of like being hungry and having someone goad you. Right. And I think that's part of it as well. But the sport in itself is, it's of course less dirty than it used to be. I mean, there's a lot less fighting. Anyone who watches, professional level hockey, I mean, will see that. I mean, they have purposely gotten rid of a lot of that, which I think is good for the game. But it's still a chippy, rough game, and you still have that. But I would actually argue that it's getting better, than what it used to be. And certainly what I remember as a kid, it's, you still, obviously, if you go to an NHL game and people have a few too many drinks, but you could see that at an NBA game, an NFL game as well, right? So.
Yeah, hopefully the parents aren't having a few too, and they're smashing the glass to get the physicality up to a higher level.
Right.
Yeah. So I was always kind of taken aback, at some of the reactions and some of the behaviors, but it was really an interesting, an interesting study in humanity too, as a coach. And it was super, super rewarding, because I think it actually was more than, obviously more than your kid, more than the team, but that community piece of it, like when you could get parents and families to band together. One of the things we always said is if we could keep the parents happy, then the kids are going to be happy, because they're going to drive to the game with a positive attitude about it, and they're going to be supportive and all that. Really, like, there's so much more there. That's a show in and of itself, I think. But
I agree.
So how do you do hockey and skiing?
Well, so the skiing is, it's a little tough. It's funny. I was talking to one of my buddies about this, who was a hockey player growing up with me, and he basically he loves to ski, and he's like, so his daughters are race, so he's up in Vermont every weekend. And what we do as a family generally is part of what we do is we take a week and we get out of Dodge, typically go out west, like a lot of people, and we just ski every day, versus kind of the weekend warrior kind of thing. Because the reality is, in hockey and like a lot of other winter sports, you're playing hockey, you can't go away for the weekend, because you're playing games all weekend. So it's just reality. But we exposed our kids to skiing at a really young age. They got a lot of lessons and been on a lot of trips, and they love it. But they don't race. They just love to ski just for leisure. But they're pretty good skiers because they started young, and I love it. And so I always joke with my oldest, who loves to ski. I say, well, you're going to have to hang out with your old man for a long time, because I'm going to go to these amazing places and I'll pay for it if you come with me. But you have to spend time with me.
Yes, so. I'm in, Dad. I'm in. So Evan, most important question of them all. Someone's hearing this for the first time. They're meeting you, in essence, for the first time, and they want to hook up with you. They want to connect with you. They want to network with you. They want to work with your company. How would they best get in touch with you?
I'd say probably two ways. One would be, I'm on LinkedIn like most people, and of course, if you message me there, I'll respond. I'd also say email. I mean, I could give my phone numbers, but like most people, I'm tied up a lot. And if you email me wherever I am in the world, I'll get back to you. So, you want me to give you my email address?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's do it.
So I guess I'll give you my work email address. It's Welch, so EWELCH at AntaeusWealth.com. And to spell that, it's Alpha Nancy Tango Alpha Echo under Sam Wealth, one word.com.
I love it. I love it. Evan, it's been a pleasure. I really appreciate you coming on, sharing your time, sharing your experience, sharing your stories. Really, really, really appreciate it. I'm looking forward to seeing you at some of the Boston events, maybe even Nerve. But thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. This is great. I felt very natural, and Mark, I definitely want to meet you. Let's hang out sometime. And and thank you for doing this. I think it's so great, and I think it makes a chapter closer. And we all want this chapter to get better and better. So, thank you for doing this.
Well, thank you for saying that. I appreciate you. I hope that people listen and watch and walk up to you and say, hey, I saw your podcast and I want to talk to you about coaching, or I want to talk to you about RIAs. So that's really cool. That is really cool. So thank you for saying that. And folks, thank you for listening. That's it. If you learned something today, which I'm sure you did, because I did, or you laughed, share this with somebody, forward this to them, share it with them. Let them know who Evan is. Thank you again, Evan.
Thank you.
And folks, this has been another exciting episode of Leadership in Action. We will see you next time.
Leadership in Action is sponsored by the Boston chapter of the Entrepreneurs Organization. As the world's only peer-to-peer network exclusively for entrepreneurs, EO helps transform the lives of those who transform the world.